Hi, welcome to the Playing with Fire podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Spitulski. I'm an ex-firefighter and a current fire investigator. I am here with a couple very interesting people. First one, we'll start with Paul Hashagen. And am I saying it correctly? Because people destroy my name.
Well, I'm Hashagen, but it's close enough. There's all different versions of it. I go by the nickname of Hash, so if somebody calls me Hashagen, I can't be upset if they call me Hash too. So as long as it's spelled correctly on the checks, that's all that matters.
Well, just wait by the mailbox. Ours is coming. I want to introduce you to my son, Austin Spitulski. He's looking at getting into the fire service. He's gotten his EMT certificate and done all of his fire science classes and still doing some advanced dysrhythmia classes. He's really started to enjoy the medical side of it. So I don't know what happened to him there. I think he got dropped, but we'll work on that. Sir, it is an honor to have you here. I've got a massive list of your accomplishments, and it would take me literally probably 5 minutes to go through this. So I'm going to ask you to kind of just give us a synopsis of what your career has been so far, and then we're going to dig into it just a little bit.
All right, I was born in Queens, New York. Lived in my grandfather's house for a couple of years, so my parents saved up enough money to buy their own house. And I do have memories of going to the firehouse with my grandfather. He was a retired FDNY firefighter. He served in Engine 76 in Manhattan, where he drove a horse-drawn hose wagon. And then the horses went out. He stayed on. And then when the new firehouse was built near where he was living in Queens, he eventually moved to Queens, and he spent the second part of his career in Queens, near the house that I grew up in. So I have memories of 315 engine and 125 truck as a little kid, sliding down the pole and laying in the bunks and doing all that stuff. So I kind of knew right away what I wanted to do, and I just waited till I grew up and had the opportunity.
That's amazing that you've come from the generations where it was horse-drawn, because there is a very rich history of the fire department with the horse-drawn steamers that would pump the water out. And I know here in Modesto, our Station 1 still has the hole up in the top where the hay bales would be stored. Well, the station has now been condemned. Prince and Charles, I believe, were the last two horses that Modesto had. So you remember the days of riding tailboard and before that, I would imagine.
Right. I got married and we moved to Freeport when I was a kid, and I used to chase the fire trucks around on my bicycle. And they had a game well system, and the bells would go in the firehouse, and it was the same thing that happened in New York City in almost every, coded fire alarm box when you learn how to count the bells. And I knew how to count the bells as a little kid because they had horns attached to it to notify the volunteer firefighters. And I could count the horns, and I had a little list, so I'd go racing off to go see what they were doing. And then years later, I had the opportunity. I was working in the phone company, and I was working in Freeport, and I was fixing a man's phone, and he had a plaque on his wall. I asked him about the plaque on his wall, and a month later, I'm in the fire department, which really tickled my wife, I must say. That we moved into a new house. We have a toddler and an infant, and I'm running out the door every time the whistle blows. So she was very thrilled.
I'll bet she was.
Eventually, she came around. She understood what we were doing.
Well, it appears so, because what are you looking at now? How many years of service? You did 25 years just with FDNY.
Right. So in 76, I joined the Freeport Fire Department, and I spent about a year and a half in Hose 5, which is in the north part of town, and then I switched to the Hook and Ladder, which was actually really close to my house. And the whole world changed for me. I was lucky enough to make a rescue when I was up in the hose company. So I had a taste of what that end of the job is like, to go get to save somebody's life. I was in no danger. The little kid was in danger, but I had a mask on. I was doing fine. The fire wasn't where I was, but it's not good for little infants to be breathing smoke. So I got the accolades, but like I said, I just found him. He was nice enough to be laying in front of me, so that was good.
Yeah, that was the one where you went right, your partner went left, and you got him, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of that over the years.
A lot of luck. It always is.
Yeah, I tell you, if you have a choice, I always choose to go left for whatever reason. I've done very well going left. I've also made rescues going right, but I'm not sure why, but I tend to go left.
That's weird. I'm a right guy. So I understand though. And I still
Yep.
use it today. So,
Yeah, it's just a feeling you have, so you go with it.
right. So you had just said something a second ago. I want to pop back to it because you talked about the code for the alarms when they would go off. And that code, based on the number of chimes or tones, would tell you where in the city the fire was roughly.
Oh yeah, oh exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, each box had a number. So
Okay.
if the number was 1, 2, 3, then the bell would ring 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
And the horns would do the same thing. So you just, once you figured out there's a little pause, you look at the list and you're on your bicycle and off you go. So that was my most cherished piece of equipment as a kid, was the location chart for where the boxes were.
Oh my gosh. That's an incredible story. I had never really thought about how that worked. You know, as a volunteer, we just would get toned out. They would say the address, but that's all it would say. We never knew. I mean, we didn't have tones going off outside. If you didn't have your pager with you, you weren't having it. And you're talking pre-pager days.
This was before pagers. Yeah, I didn't have a pager yet. And matter of fact, I think the first radio I got was a Bearcat scanner, little handheld scanner that was scanning the world. You know, I could listen to fires in the city and everything else. So, but yeah, it was before pagers. It was back step riding. And by 1978, I had scored well on the New York City test. And I got on the fire department on October 14th of 1978. And when I started in 74 engine, I was riding the back step there. And occasionally we get sent over to the hook and ladder truck, so I'm riding on the sideboard there. It was neat. I had a lot of hours on the side of the hook and ladder truck of Freeport, and there was something to be said for those days. However, when it was snowing or raining, the back step was not fun.
It was brutal.
In the summertime, it was great, but the rest of the time it was horrible, and I was glad to see it go.
Absolutely. I remember when it left, when the state or whoever decides all that stuff says, you can't ride back here anymore. We were a little sad because you weren't getting the manpower out at the incident like you would if you could ride tailboard. You put 3 guys on the tailboard easy and they would go. So there's a couple things I want to hit on, especially your time with Rescue 1. Tell me a little bit about that. What was your job? What did you do there?
Well, I guess the easiest way to figure it out is when I was a little kid, my grandfather got me several toy fire trucks, you know, little Tonka trucks or whatever. And he got me a pumper, and then he got me a hook and ladder truck. And then when I got my tonsils out, I came home from getting the tonsils out, and there was a rescue truck. And I didn't know what a rescue truck did, so I asked him, what does a rescue truck do? And he used to tell me things about the fire department, not too many, like kid-friendly stories. They had a fire in a candy store, and when they put the fire out, they were eating ice cream out of the vat, you know, with their hands, and stuff that kids would love to hear. I'm not going to tell you about the death and destruction,
Right.
certainly. And, you know, I was always tickled by all these little stories that he would give me. And when I asked him, what does the rescue truck do? And without blinking, he just said, oh, they rescue firemen. And that left such an impression on me. Like, wow, they rescue firemen. Yeah. Okay. So that was always in the back of my head. And when I was getting on the job of going for training, the idea of going to a rescue company is in the back of my head. But wanting to do something and being able to do something are two totally different things.
Right.
So I had to go put my time in. The way it works in New York City, the rescue company, especially then, the men were picked by the captain. The chief of department picked the captains of the rescue companies, and the captains of the rescue companies handpicked their own people.
Oh,
And that finally changed in the 90s when special operations started, where all the rescue companies were in their own battalion. The squad companies came, things changed. Ray Downey had a lot to do with that. So when FEMA started, so we tried to line ourselves up differently in New York City to keep the training, all the people in the training in the same area. But I'm a young kid going to fires before all that happened. I'm just watching Rescue One, and that's where I want to be. But I'm not telling anybody. There's one guy I told that I was friends with that was in the company, so he knew. But they told me to keep my mouth shut and keep a low profile, so that's what I'm doing. I'm not going around. I'm not telling anybody what I want to do, because they're going to tar and feather you in the firehouse if you give them away too much information. So,
oh yeah.
Until I was first grade, and then I went and talked to the captain. I did about a year in the engine, a little more than a year. And as luck would have it, in the engine company in 74 engine, I made a rescue there. And then I was in Ladder 25, which is they used to be in the same building, but they moved them for different reasons over the years. But it's the Associated Hook and Ladder Company. And I went there, and I made a rescue while I was there. And now, once I'm first grade, then I figured, let me go talk to the captain of Rescue One now. So I talked to him, and I guess I had a little bit over 4 years, just less than 5 years on the job when I went to Rescue One, which was kind of quick in comparison to a lot of other people. But the captain was in the good position at that time. Brian O'Flaherty was the boss. And he had a makeup of the company that 3/4 of the company had over 20 years in the company.
Wow.
So they had been in Rescue One for 20 years, these guys. And then he had all these young guys. We were very moldable. So he brought us in, and he said, I don't want you to get a whole bunch of bad habits. So we'll get you early and bring you in here. And don't try to be these guys, but listen to them. I want you to be you. Don't try to be Bill. Don't try to be Frank. You be Paul, but pay attention to what they're doing, because they do it right. And I just kept my mouth shut and watched everything they did. And I tell you what, sitting on the back of that truck, once I got settled in and I knew I was going to be there, it was like I felt like a rookie on the 27 Yankees.
Wow.
I'm sitting there with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. I can't believe that they were actually letting me work here. It was like absolutely incredible.
Kind of have that feeling right now, just speaking with you and grabbing some of your history. It's like, I can't believe I'm sitting here talking to you. You did 20 years on Rescue One?
Yeah.
Did you retire as a chief from FDNY?
No, various people tried to get me to study. My problem was, at first I was reading too much, and then I was writing too much, but I wasn't really studying. And very competitive tests in New York City, very competitive. And the top students are the guys that get the best marks, and you can't be reading novels or writing books while you're studying. That has to be your full-time job. And I never really put the time and effort into it. But I also didn't want to leave where I was. I was in Rescue One. I was happy as a clam there. And then after about 5 years in the company, the captain asked me to drive him. And I was a rescue chauffeur for the next 15 years. So
Wow.
I had it made. I was right where I wanted to be. The chauffeurs never got detailed, so I worked all the time in my firehouse. I drove in there. I didn't have to go somewhere else if somebody needed them. I knew where I was going, and I was not about to give that up.
That's actually, you continued to write, even though you may not like it, or you didn't like the testing part of it, but you have written, I found at least 8 books that you've put out there. How many have you authored?
Yeah, there's 8 books, there's kids' books, I guess about a dozen altogether, cartoon books and things like that. But they're history books. There's too many people. I worked with Vinnie Dunn and John Norman and, all these guys that are textbook guys. I'm not going to start telling somebody the best way to stretch a hose or whatever. I'll take the nozzle once you get it stretched. Don't get me wrong. I want to go to the fire.
Right.
But there were so many guys that are already doing it And I just loved the history so much that I found a little area that nobody was touching. And then Harvey Eisner from Firehouse Magazine, I got to be friends with him like right off the bat when I went to Rescue One. I think I met him in the first month. He was taking pictures of some big fire we were at. And the next thing I know, he's getting me to write for Firehouse Magazine. So that kind of started it. It was more a report rather than a technical article,
Right.
you know. But the love for history just kept overriding even the technical articles. And eventually, Harvey had the idea, why don't you write a column every month? And I wrote the Rekindles column for Firehouse for, I guess, about 15 years or so, 20. But
Wow.
that was the first of my history writing.
And in 2017, you were inducted into the Firehouse Hall of Fame. Is that through the magazine or is that?
Yeah.
Okay. What an incredible accomplishment for that to be acknowledged upon you. It's just awesome.
They knocked my socks off on that one, really. It made me think of the 27 Yankees, and somehow I end up in the Hall of Fame. It's like, wait a minute,
Now you see guys down the road, young guys, my son here, will look at you and be thinking, I've been introduced to one of those Yankees, because I've got a list here of names for you that I need to know which one we call you. Okay. Do we call you the Legend? Do we call you Hollywood Hash? Do we call you Chief? Or should we just call you Mr. GOAT? The greatest of all times.
Well, just call me when dinner's ready, really.
I love
all those things are flattering. I mean, it's Hollywood Hash. It's just, I don't know what it was with the Hollywood Hash stuff. That first rescue I made when I was in the volunteers, I walked out with this little kid in my arms, and a man took my picture. And it hasn't stopped since then. And I've gotten so... They were accusing me at one point of having inflatable children that if I saw a camera, I would blow them up and carry them out. But I have at least 3 or 4 really good shots of me carrying kids, and it's what, that's just what happened. I didn't run to the camera. They came to me.
It's a blessing. Although you may not realize it yet, it is a blessing. And it's funny, in the fire service, I was always taught to avoid the camera, because anytime you showed up in a publication, you were buying ice cream or dinner. It was
Yep.
I'll bet you went broke.
Well, then we also had the things too that if your name gets put on the roll of merit, if you made a rescue and they give you something for it, you're buying the meal too. So I had one string of like a year and a half where every time I went somewhere, something crazy happened.
Wow.
And they were throwing stuff at me, and I was buying a lot of meals.
So you said you were on Rescue One. What specific job does a rescue have when it pulls up on an incident, any kind of incident?
Well, the unique thing about New York City rescue companies, they are assigned to an alarm in their own neighborhood, and they're special called. They're also added to the alarm if there's a working fire, or if the dispatcher has an idea that their services could be useful to have there. Basically, the rescue company is a giant toolbox. We have equipment for any type of rescue that you run into. Water-related rescues, confined space, high-angle ropes, anywhere that you can get yourself stuck, we have a way of going to get you. But everybody really goes there because you get to go to all the fires as well. And then we're a little bit, it depends, each rescue company is a little bit different because each part of New York City is a little bit different. So what Rescue 1 does in high-rise areas is going to be different than what Rescue 4 does in Queens, where it's predominantly private dwellings, say, or up in the Bronx, where Rescue 3 is. They have a lot of big old apartment houses, so they have slightly different ways of doing things. And we are basically it's up to the chief to use us how he wants to use us. We can go to work as an additional engine company. We can go to work as an additional searching unit. We can go to the roof to ventilate. If they're running into any problems with anything where they can't ventilate, because things are in their way, they have to be cut or moved or whatever, we do that. And if anything goes wrong, I've been to a number of fires where things were going, the operation started and the wind changed or something collapsed or whatever. And then the fact that you're there, you immediately get set to take care of that problem. And for the most part, when it gets into those technical things, guys are pretty willing because they know you have the special training, to let you get in there. But it's a method to anything. If I know a guy is in a building collapse and one of the guys that works with him is there, I'm not going to push the guy out of the way while he's trying to get his friend out. I'm going to figure out how both of us can get in there, work together. But, we do have a specialized part of the job. And the fun thing is, I've done every kind of operation that you can think of, from scuba diving to high angle ropes, inside of tanks, train crashes, sinking boats. It's just absolutely incredible. Grand Central Station has 4 levels of usable track. And then I think there's 5 levels below that they haven't used in 100 years.
Wow.
And back in the 80s, there were people living down there. And we had a bad fire down there one time, and just to see if they looked like zombies coming out of the smoke was very, very strange. These people were not going outside. They called them chuds or some ridiculous thing.
Wow.
But, it's just like the eras of the city were so different, too, to work there in the late 70s, early 80s when, it was still part of what we called the war years. And then crack was rampant. So there was all the craziness behind everything that was going on with crack. And then Disney moved into Times Square and Manhattan changed. And, all the dirty movies went away and suddenly Broadway came back. But now we have Dirty Elmo, and it's kind of reversing itself a little bit.
Austin, do you have any questions?
So the station that Rescue One's at, where is it in relation to the entire city and the World Trade Towers?
Yeah, Rescue One has always been in Manhattan. Rescue One was organized in 1915. It used to be all the way down downtown on Great Jones Street. They used to have a section of the city known as Hell's 100 Acres. It was all the mercantile stuff, rag shops, manufacturing, some of the biggest, scariest buildings. That's where the worst fires were. So they wanted the rescue company down there to help them be able to get into the building. And then they had the only breathing apparatus, the smoke helmets. So if it was really, really bad or there were gas leaks, they could actually make a difference. And as the years went by, the fire load shifted as people moved uptown more. And eventually there were more and more hotels, and they moved Rescue One up to Midtown. Right now, Rescue One's on 43rd Street between 10th and 11th. And our response area is all the way from the tip of Manhattan down at the Battery, the lowest point, all the way up into Harlem. And we roughly 125th Street across. It's not a straight line. It goes by what used to be battalion areas in the computer. So it comes across 125th Street and then down to 118th Street. But we can get special called anywhere in the city for our technical expertise and our special tools. I've driven the rescue rig or responded with it to every single borough. I've been to New Jersey a couple of times. I was to a fire in, where the heck was it? Up above, I forget, but out of New York City. I was working at Rescue 3 one day and they got called. So we went out of the city to help somebody else. But usually there's one rescue company in each borough. Rescue 1 covers the majority of Manhattan. Rescue 2 covers the majority of Brooklyn. Rescue 3 covers the South Bronx and a good chunk of Harlem. Rescue 4 covers Queens and a little bit of Brooklyn. And Rescue 5 covers Staten Island and another little piece of Brooklyn right over the bridge. So, and then we also all work together and work in wherever they need us.
Well, geez, with such a small response area, you probably aren't very busy.
Yeah.
Jeez. So before I jump into some of your stories, I kind of want to give your heritage a little bit of a click. Tell me about your grandfather and your dad, because they were instrumental in getting you into the fire service. As you talked about when we opened up, you were with your grandpa, you would go to calls and you just drove him nuts. Is that how it was with your dad too?
My father realized when he was a young man that he probably couldn't get into the fire department because he needed glasses. And right after World War II, there was so many available men to join the fire department that they had all this training and all this experience from the war, and they came back, and he's standing there, and he figured, with glasses, there's no way I'm even going to get this job. So he didn't bother even trying it. I don't think he cared one way or the other. But I drove him crazy. I wanted him, when we lived in Freeport, I wanted him to join the fire department all the time. You know, I would bring applications, all this stuff. But he was a man who was working all this overtime to pay for this new house, and he had a house full of kids, and you know, he just didn't have the time or the inclination. So I just followed my grandfather around wherever he went. My father encouraged it. Matter of fact, my father was one of the first scuba divers on Long Island, a sport diver. Just that attracted him. He was always a waterman. We learned to surf together when I was a kid, and he would go scuba diving. And I remember he asked me if I wanted to go scuba diving. I used to get sinus headaches, so I always said no. I stayed in the boat. And then years later, we're at Medal Day, and he's laughing at me for getting a medal for saving people underwater when I was the kid that wouldn't get out of the boat. So it was a nice turnaround in the long run on that one.
Well, he must have done a lot for you, your father, because not just your grandfather made you the man you are, but your father as well. And to come from a solid home sets that personality, that give personality where you're there to help people all the time. And with your extended career in this and books and doing podcasts like this, you can see there is a passion in you for the fire service. And that's not everybody has that.
Right. Yeah, and I guess, you know, I never really thought about my dad in that way, but I think you're really right. And I'd also have to credit my mom a lot. Both my parents were creative and hands-on. My father was always good with tools. He could do plumbing, he could do electric, he could do carpentry, he could do all that stuff. And so could my mom. And like mom had asked dad, I want to build a deck in the backyard. We'll get to it. And then she built it herself. So I think I got a little bit of my rescue mentality from my mom, that she would say, yes, I'll do it. Don't worry about it. And I remember my dad coming home and looking at it, and he didn't say a word. She built this deck in the backyard. He came out and he put the level on it, and then he was really angry because it was level, and he walked away. But she always told me that you can do things. Yeah. Don't be afraid to do things. She could sew. She used power tools in the house. She would redecorate couches and, you name it.
Gosh.
So she was super handy. I used to tell people if you gave her steel wool, she could knit a Volkswagen. She could build anything, it seemed like to me. So I think between the both of them, that kind of got me, when I got in the firehouse, I had a good idea of a lot of things, of how things work, how things get done. And being the oldest of a bunch of kids, I was used to taking care of the little guys. So, just stepping up was what you did.
Right. Were you on Rescue 1 when you did the rescue of the helicopter that crashed in the river?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because as you just said, you didn't like water, but then obviously you got on rescue, so that made you like water.
Yeah.
So tell me about that call.
Yeah. I liked water. I just didn't want to go underwater to get a headache. I liked surfing. I liked swimming. I liked everything about it, except nobody told me about that you could get rid of the pressure in your head. I found that out when I took the scuba classes. My father was laughing too much to realize that he didn't tell me that part. But right when I got into Rescue 1, they just started, it was the beginnings of the dive program. So I don't think I'm in a company a month or two, then I'm on my days off. And just how New York City Fire Department always work. We're paying for the training ourselves.
Wow.
And we went and got basic scuba certification. And once everybody had that, then they could convince the city that they're going to get an instructor in. So we got a Navy SEAL in. They set the program up. It was great. So just as the program takes off, I'm one of the first of the qualified divers. There were guys that were in the company longer, but when the program started, for being a fire department diver, I have as much seniority as everybody else because it's all brand new.
Right.
And then it just happens that 2 of the days that I was working, there were incidents. The first one was in, get my years right, 85. A helicopter went down in the East River, and a whole bunch of people got out of the helicopter, and they were rescued out of the water by cops, firefighters, passing civilians. I remember a school teacher jumped in, all sorts of cool, heroic things. And they have a little rope tied to the helicopter, and it's floating up and down because the East River isn't really a river. It's more like an estuary. And that water wants to get out, and it's heading south. It's trying to get under the Verrazano Bridge eventually, go past Lower Manhattan and get out of here. So it's moving water, and I was just lucky enough to pull a man out. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. So there was all sorts of hullabaloo from that, TV interviews and a medal and all the rest of it. And then the next year, a traffic helicopter went down live on the air. We didn't happen to hear it, and that was a channel on the radio we listened to. But this one was 6 blocks away from the firehouse, and we got there in a shot, and I was able to dress quickly, get in the water, and I pulled the first person out of the water. He was strapped in the helicopter. I had to cut his belt. I was the pilot. And I handed him off. They brought him into the shore, and they went back down. It took me a minute to find the other person in the helicopter, the passenger. That was the lady that was doing the live traffic reports, because she had been in a previous helicopter crash, and she almost drowned because she had the seatbelt on. So she made up her mind, whenever she goes in a helicopter, I'm not wearing a seatbelt anymore, because they almost killed me last time. So unfortunately, it did kill her that time because she got injured in the crash.
Wow.
And, sadly, but amazingly, the helicopter pilot made a full recovery and stopped flying helicopters, got a degree as a lawyer, and did some amazing work taking care of abused women. It was a DA or something. Nice. I got to talk to some of his family recently, and you always wonder when you help somebody out, I hope they did good with their life.
Right.
This guy did amazing. This guy did great. So.
Tom Hanks says in Saving Private Ryan, earn it. And you wonder if they've earned it.
Yeah.
So how many water rescues do you think you've conducted?
Well, I've been in the water frequently in New York City. Those 2 dive jobs, I was able to pull people out. But I've done it in Freeport also, where we had dive jobs, because we set up a dive team and the volunteers in Freeport, and we've had success several times. So I was involved in a couple here, helped other communities around here, because as part of the New York City thing, I became a dive instructor and helped set up the rescue school when we set up our formal rescue school, and helped set up the curriculum for scuba diving and under-pier firefighting and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually branched into other different portions of it. But yeah, when we started up the rescue school, that was a really neat thing too, to start at the very beginning when the school started, and to be a lead instructor for a good 10 years or so. That was very rewarding, a lot of fun.
Let's talk real quick about your relationship with your daughter and what she has done for you with the social media stuff. I've just heard a lot that you have a very special click with her.
Yeah, I'm lucky. Both my daughters are amazing. My oldest daughter, Jessica, is a high school teacher, and she helps me a lot with my writing. She does. She's one of my first readers, so I give her the manuscript, and because I remember the first article that I submitted to a magazine. WNYF is the New York City's in-house magazine. And I thought that this article was, take it to Michelangelo and just start putting it right into marble because this is perfect. And they handed me back a sheet of paper that had so much red on it, I couldn't see what I had written. And then I realized, they wanted it in English. I'm sorry. So, it eventually all came back to me. And then with my my daughter's tutelage and my wife's tutelage, she was a teacher as well. They would take good care of me. And then the writing was doing fine. Elizabeth, my other daughter, she had been a reported on 9/11, as a matter of fact, and got to see her down there, which was totally unusual. And she had a great career. She was a reporter, became an anchor. I think she ended up with 13 Emmys, something like that.
Wow.
And then she retired from that, and she got into all this media stuff. And it was her idea, let's do some things and we could tell some stories.
Yep.
I said, all right, well, I'm already telling stories with the book. I guess if they want to look at an old man tell a fire story, I'm in. So she was the one who got me to do it. And amazingly, one of the things we did got 1 million views.
Wow.
I am absolutely stupefied that 1 million people would have that interest in listening to a story I had to tell. It's incredible.
Right. Do you want to give a plug to any of them?
Yeah, watch them. I don't know how to tell you. They're on Instagram and they're on TikTok and they're on YouTube. How you get there, I don't know.
That's kind of how I end these.
He knows how to get on there.
We'll make sure we put it somewhere on our link to be able to get to your social media accounts.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. You've got all these different career paths as you move forward.
You got to keep moving. It's hard to hit a moving target.
That is a great point that I would say to my son right now is don't ever stay still at the station. You need to be the first one doing it and then take it as it comes back to you. But you need to go with the flow.
The worst thing in the world for a new firefighter to ever say is, I know that.
Oh, good point.
You don't want to ever say that because I had a drill with a guy. We just went over a tool, did the whole thing, and we put the tool away and walked up, and a different guy came. Hey, you want to go over this tool? Sure.
Yep.
I'm not going to tell him no. He said, and you know what? He told me something different than what the other guy did. Like there's a different way to use the tool too. He's keying on this is more important. He's keying on that's more. And that's what you want. I'd like to have every guy in the company give me a drill on every tool. Yep. Then you get 20 different opinions on how the tool can be used. And that's the best drill in the world.
Absolutely.
But you could just stop all of that by just saying, I already know that. Number one, you won't get that drill. And I guarantee you that gentleman is going to turn around and never talk to you again about trying to help you out.
Yep. Good advice for everybody.
Yeah, any job.
So I know this is probably one of the things that interests me the most because 9/11 was very impactful for me. I was just getting ready to start teaching the academy. I was an assistant instructor out here at the fire academy in Modesto. And when that happened, we basically turned off the academy. We told the guys to go home. Every one of those guys went down to the blood bank and gave blood, although they overwhelmed the system pretty quickly. But that's, again, the personality of the people that are getting into the fire service. So 9/11 is a very memorable day for me for so many different reasons. You were there not only for 9/11, but you were there for the one in 93 too, correct?
Yeah, similar situation too, because I was off for both of them. In 93, I just got a phone call from one of the guys I worked with. There's been an explosion. Firefighters are hurt, and let's go. So we just got in the car, drove in, and we got there, and so many other firefighters had done the same thing.
Right.
That when I got to our rig, a couple of guys were in the back of the truck, and they were banged up. At that one, Kevin Shea got hurt. He was crawling on a concrete floor like a ramp going into the parking area. And he's following, you can't see your hand in front of your face. He's following the sounds of people screaming in front of him. And as he crawls, the concrete lets go, and he goes down into the basement. And he gets banged up. He got partially impaled on a piece of rebar. I think he broke a leg or a foot. He's banged up. But he's still conscious, and he's still there, and he can see, but nobody can see him. He's on the bottom looking up, and must have been some sight, because that place was blown up. That was incredible. And they spent a whole bunch of people. Squad 1 came. They lowered a guy down. That was the first guy to him. Other people found ways in. And a lot of people got banged up just trying to save Kevin.
Wow.
And then as the next wave of guys, the off-duty guys came in, they got geared up, got extra radios. The people that were hurt, they sent them to the hospital, and then people took over as Rescue 1. And the chief didn't even realize at first that the guy he's talking to on the radio wasn't the original Rescue 1 officer anymore. You know, it's somebody else. That was one of those, a true test for a command post is a job like either one of those. It's just overwhelming when you have 5 alarms worth of companies coming, and where do you put everybody and how do you keep track of everybody? It's amazing. So yeah, I was there for the first one, and the second one I was on vacation and did the same thing. My daughter woke me up, put the TV on. Next thing I'm out the door and driving in, and we almost got caught in a collapse there. And
Wow.
by the grace of God, didn't get clobbered. A bad battery on a car slowed us down enough that we didn't get killed. So
Wow. Before we go there, let's pop back to the 93 one. And for the people who don't recall this, because I'm guessing there are, do you know the 93 World Trade Center bombing?
I do not.
So that one was a vehicle bomb that drove into the parking structure, which the parking garage was down subsurface. It was, 8 levels, something like that, below the World Trade Center ground level. They drove the vehicle in, and then they blew up the vehicle, and it collapsed a number of levels to where I'm surprised he only fell down one level. I mean, it had multiple levels.
He probably fell more than one level.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, how far down he went, but yeah.
So you had the rescue of a firefighter, and you guys were still performing rescue for everybody that was in the tower, correct?
Right. Yeah. They were very, very busy until they got Kevin. But even after they got Kevin, they still had the whole rest of that building. See, one of the things that you'll learn as a firefighter is it doesn't matter what affects a person that you're trying to help. Oh, there's not giant flames anymore. We put the fire out. But people still get excited. People still make mistakes. People still can have heart attacks. People still can fall down the stairs because they're not paying attention to what they're doing. And there's thousands of people that had to be removed from that building. So it was a whole afternoon's work just to make sure everybody that was in the building was okay.
Right.
So that's, 5 alarms worth of firemen just going around and making sure everybody's good. And, that went a long time, that job. But we had no idea then that the 93 thing would look small in comparison because you had no idea at all what was going to happen next.
Right.
Nobody, their plan was, I believe, to knock one of those buildings over. That's what they tried to park their explosive-laden vehicle next to a main bearing structure to try to knock the building down, and luckily it didn't work.
Right.
But they did significant damage. I don't remember the numbers offhand, but they killed a number of people and injured a lot of people.
What was Kevin's job before he entered that building?
Well, we're talking about Kevin Shea, and Kevin Shea was a member of Rescue 1. And if you remember back a little bit before 9/11, Kevin became probably the most famous firefighter in the United States when he was involved in a rope rescue.
Oh my gosh.
He was in a rope rescue in Times Square, or a recording studio, top floor. Rescue 1 pulled up, and the first new hook and ladder truck was somewhere else. I think they went to the shops to get fixed or whatever, but they weren't there. we pulled up. The chief said, rescue, go up there and get those guys. So up they went, and Kevin lowered Patty Barr down, and they rescued the first person. And usually we have a history of using ropes that goes back to the early 1800s. Since we've been a paid fire department, we've taken ropes to fires. They always have. We have a life-saving rope. Unfortunately, we had an incident in the early 80s when a rope broke and 2 firefighters got killed. So they went out and they got a stronger rope. We used the rope in question on this was a left-handed laid nylon rope, 150 feet long with 10,000 pounds breaking strength. But even if you put the weight of 2 people on it, you're supposed to, according to our regulations, condemn the rope. You should never use it again. Even though it was well beyond the breaking strength, they decided there was no other rope on the roof. So the lieutenant said, turn the rope around and use the other end. Because they only lowered him down 1 story. We didn't lower him to the ground. They went to the top floor, picked the guy up, lowered him down 1, and brought him in that window. So he went to the safe area of the floor below the fire. They turned the rope around, and then they lowered Kevin Shea down, and he picked up the second person. So that video, the amazing thing about New York City is, and that there weren't little cameras yet in telephones, but there was a lot of video cameras around. And on the news that night, there were cutaway shots below, across the street, from the side. The news gathered all these things. It looked like a movie because you could cut from this guy to that guy. So Kevin was everywhere. And he got a big award for Firehouse Magazine, and he hit the circuit after that. Everybody was Kevin's friend. And now he pulls up at the World Trade Center a couple of years later, and they are working as a team, sent to the fire area. They knew it was an explosion. Nobody had any idea it was a terrorist explosion yet. They thought it was a transformer originally. And he is just with a group, but he happened to be in the lead. And he is following those voices calling for help. And that's when the concrete collapsed beneath him. And the other guys luckily didn't fall. And now they decided that they had to go get Kevin. So Kevin went from the most famous New York City fireman at the time to the most banged up New York City fireman at the time, and we had to go get Kevin. And that only burnished his reputation that he lived through it, because now it's like, he's invincible. Even the World Trade Center can't knock him down. So
Wow.
If you ever met Kevin, he's a sweetheart. What a nice guy.
Wow. Great story. And I can only imagine experience, you're on a concrete floor. The last thing you're thinking about is that floor collapsing.
Yeah.
So to crawl in blacked out, I'm sure, and then to just drop, you have to be thinking, okay, what did I mess up? How did I get here? As he's laying down there waiting to be rescued. I can't imagine. So what an interesting story. Now, the 93 bombing, we know it was terrorist, and that they know a lot about who did it, why they did it. I don't recall the exact vehicle and the amount of explosives that were used, but like you said, they knew what they were doing because they parked the vehicle close to where they felt it would bring the building either down into the other building or just drop it. So they didn't succeed that day. But I can't imagine that the fire department didn't learn something from that day that made you a little bit better prepared for 9/11, 2001. Do you recall some of the things that you guys implemented because of 93 that helped in 01?
No, because what happened is by the time 9/11 happened, there were all sorts of things in place. Nobody expected those buildings to come down.
Right.
Not really, not off the bat. I know there's all sorts of people out there on the internet that freeze frame and look at this. Oh, that's an explosion.
Right.
2 airplanes hit it, and they were big, giant airplanes.
Yep.
And they were full of fuel, and that's what took the buildings down.
Yep.
We were there. We saw it happen. The other building that went down, the other high rise, it was there, 20-something stories. It burned all afternoon. We were ordered. We rescued everybody out of the building. They didn't have a way to put the fire out, and they didn't want to risk any more people. Let it burn.
Right.
They just kept an area away. We never did that in the history of New York City, let a high-rise building burn. But we let that one burn on purpose. And then that fell down. But it burned all afternoon. You can't
Right.
expect a building to stand up all day with a major fire in it. But everything changed. Like, there were lots of plans and there were lots of good things. There's always been radio problems. The way we use radios is different than the way the police use radios. We can run a fire in New York City where there's a major fire and a quarter of a mile away or half a mile away, there's another major fire. And everybody's on the same channel because by design, the wattage is low, so you're not bleeding into the other jobs. It's just for this job. And when they tried to change that, guys didn't like it because it wasn't what we were used to. So they were banging heads on radios and radios. They tried to change them. We actually went back to less powerful radios, and then that happens. And if people were complaining about the radios, but we're the ones that asked for the less powerful radios because we were used to them.
Right.
And for your average fire, they work great. When you get something like this, nothing's going to work great because it's such an unusual situation. A building that big, you can't prepare. There were so many things happening at that job. There's no way you could have a checklist even to figure out what to do. Just basically what they were telling them, go do the best you can.
Right.
And off they went. When we finally got in there, I'm walking down West Street and I'm looking up at that original picture. And to those at home,
Wow.
that's the building that was hit first. That's Rescue 1 actually responding to the original crash. You could see up there. As we're walking down the block, I'm looking up at that, and I'm trying to figure out how many floors that is. As I'm walking down the block, I got my gear in my hand, walking down the middle of the street, and I'm trying to count floors because my plan was to go there, right to the bottom of that giant hole, because I knew that's where my guys would be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm coming down, I'm doing fine, I'm looking up. Like I said, I'm counting. The other building already fell.
Right.
And that was really weird. There's one spot if you come in to Manhattan from Long Island, you take the Long Island Expressway and there's a viaduct and the road goes up. And when you get to the top of the road before you go down into the tunnel, the whole skyline lays out in front of you. It's gorgeous. And for the first time and only time, I got to the top and I looked, and there's only one World Trade Center building.
Wow.
That one had already fallen, and it was like, we just couldn't believe it. Like, wow. And then we get in the tunnel and we get down there, and then on top of that one was a television antenna, big giant black and white striped antenna. And I'm looking at that, and I just saw it move. And I knew immediately the building's coming down because there's no reason for that to move. And I just yelled, and I think my friend Frankie, who I worked with for a very, very long time, says, I never heard you yell before, but I knew what you meant. And we just turned around and we ran as fast as we could the other direction, and it just dove under whatever you could find because you could feel the ground shaking. And I guess we ended up maybe a half a block. That we ran just enough that if we would have stayed where we were, we probably would have got killed, but we ran just enough that it didn't hurt us.
Wow. You think
But
you're
then you
within
gotta
a couple
breathe that.
blocks?
You got to breathe that air,
Right.
It's like, that was the start of a horrible day right after that.
You think you were within a couple blocks of Tower 1?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
We were just approaching the overpass, the Chambers Street pedestrian overpass. We were about a half a block coming to that. Because now I'm looking up, and that's when I saw that tower go. We had to run. I just dropped everything and ran the other way.
Wow. So on 9/11, the morning of 9/11, how were you notified of it?
I was sleeping. I had stayed up late the night before because I was on vacation. I stayed up late working on a book. And my wife had gotten up in the morning, gone off to work. She's a teacher. I'm sleeping in a little bit. And all of a sudden, boom, the bedroom door opens. Here's my daughter. And she says, put on the television. So I click on the TV. Don't even have to find a channel. It's on everything. There's the World Trade Center on fire. And as soon as I saw just the picture I showed before, that hole with the smoke coming out, I'm getting dressed. I know the building. You don't have to say a word. I know I'm going in.
You said you couldn't get there at first because you had a battery problem with your vehicle?
Yeah, I borrowed a chief's car from the Freeport Fire Department. I had been chief the year before, and I figured if they're going to shut the roads down, if you got a red car with lights, they're going to let you in. And because the battery was dead on the spare chief's car, if we would have got there 15 minutes sooner, we probably would have been down at the command post. And everybody at the command post got killed.
Wow.
So.
Divine intervention, maybe, huh?
Yeah. Well, when it's not your day, it's not your day.
I recall some of the video of the immediate aftermath of the towers being down and all the different, we call them the personal alarm devices that were on the SCBAs, and how there were hundreds of them going off all over the place. And that we were able to get a couple of, an engine company out of a stairwell and a couple miscellaneous guys in the debris. But how long did the hope last that we would find more guys out there?
Well, the first day it was all pretty strong. My job as chauffeur, usually at a fire, my job was to go where the first line was, to make sure that they stayed there, that they had enough hose. Because a lot of times they didn't know the rescue was there. So if we went up above, they think everybody, let's get out of here, but they don't know other people are there. So anyway, I used to go with the first hose quite often. So my instinct was to just go. And I had a guy with me in the beginning, it's a doctor, and I put him by the ambulance, and I just kept going. And they ended up exactly where I wanted to be, but I was pretty much by myself. And then a couple other guys started popping up. But where we were, it took me maybe 20 minutes to realize that I can't do a thing here. I can hear the pass alarms going off. Those little alarms are going off. I'm climbing down. I can't move any of the steel. I can't do. We're not going to be able to get to these people. The same guys that were in the car with me stayed on the periphery of the collapse and actually were doing real rescue work, because at the edge of the collapse, that's where there were people that weren't in the building that got caught by stuff that came down, or the firefighters and stuff, and they're doing all this heroic stuff. But I went too far and put myself in a position where I couldn't do anything. And it took me a while to realize that, and I had to backtrack and put myself in a better position to be able to do something. But that is something I'll never forget, just the sound of those alarms going off, and you couldn't get to them. Hundreds of them going off.
Right.
And just the sea of that, all that metal lattice work that fell down on the top of it, and those giant box beams, and everything was just way, way too heavy to move. And just, I think the next day, after they got the guys out of the stairwell, to get to where the last live people were is the most dangerous spot in the whole place. And every time people started to go there, they would get yelled at by the chiefs not to go up there, because it really was. And it was shifting. You can actually see the pile moving. Wow. But that's where the guys were, because at the top of that pile was the lifeboat, that little section of stairs where 6th Truck and the chief of the 11th Battalion and 1 or 2 other people, Mickey Cross, a lieutenant, he was stuck in there too. And we could hear them on the radio, and he's trying to give us, just go to the glass doors and make a left. He has no idea what it looks like now. Then we finally got them out. They saw some light, and the people figured out how to get them. The next day, we were up early, and there were no chiefs. The chiefs were having a meeting. So I think Paul Soman from Rescue 2 ran over, and he was the first guy to start climbing the mountain. And he went up the pile, and people were following. I guess I was about maybe 30 behind him. It was like climbing Mount Everest or something, except it was on fire.
Right.
And it took at least 20 minutes or a half hour to climb to the top of this thing. And he goes up, and he finds the last live person that was taken out that morning. He yells, he hears a muffled answer, he goes in. The lady was in the same area that those guys were trapped in the staircase, but she was covered with stuff, sheetrock and other things, and she was muffled. They couldn't hear her. She had been trying to get herself out, and finally they get her out. So I guess there was 100 of us that were involved in the last rescue, but it felt so good to hand a live person by. And my eyes were so shot from the day before and finally after that, and with the sun coming up, I had gotten all the way to the top. I had helped hand her down, and I realized I couldn't see anymore. So I went all the way back down and had to go get my eyes washed, and they wanted me to go to the hospital. So I kept running away from different people because they were trying to get me in an ambulance. But then I saw that lady that we just took down, and she was getting her eyes washed out. So I sat next to her and talked to her for a couple of minutes, and then I got cleaned up enough and I went back. But yeah, some things you just don't forget.
Your stories are so impactful. I mean, I can visualize how you're describing it, and it's good that it ended on that note.
Yeah, and that's kind of when we kind of realized that we kept hoping that we're going to come upon a pocket somewhere that
Right.
they'll just move this one thing. There'll be a grand ballroom full of people waiting for us, but that wasn't the case. I believe that lady was the last live victim taken away.
Wow.
And it was just, and that's part of the thing that you're going to have to learn too if you come into the fire service, is that you can't save everybody.
Right.
I've seen guys take fires personally, throwing their helmets down and making this, freaking out. Like, unless you set the fire, there's no reason for you to be excited if you go to a fire. It's just, these people are counting on you to come up with a clear head and do a professional job. Not, like, is there a better number besides 911 to call, like 912? Will they send smarter people or somebody that's not freaking out? So it's up to the people that pull up on the red trucks to be professional, whether they pay you or not.
Words of wisdom right there. Do you find that the guys that survived the 9/11, that you guys have a closer bond than you did before, or did it change it at all?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. It was unique because there were so few of us left. I lost 11 guys out of my firehouse. And as I was explaining, when there was a couple of us, about maybe 4 or 5 of us from Rescue 1, that were with 4 or 5 guys from all the other companies that were instructors at the rescue school. So everybody in special operations, all the other rescue companies and the squad companies, and especially the squads, because except for Squad 1, they were all new. In the late 90s, they opened up all these squad companies. So all of these guys, we got to teach, so we knew them all. And I stopped counting. They had sent a poster down, I guess, after the first week. And it was, a poster of everybody that we lost, or people are still just missing at that point. And I got to 75 and I stopped counting. I said, I just, people that I considered personal friends. And I'm halfway through this poster. I said, this is just crazy, I don't need to know the number. It's just heartbreaking.
Right. It probably hurts still, doesn't it?
Oh, the only cool thing is I see my friends' families doing well, that their kids are thriving. My friend Eddie Garrity, who he was a chief by this point, but we both have been firefighters in Rescue 1. Always have Eddie hand by, closely standing by to help. But he has, I believe, 2 sons on the fire department. And, the legacy goes on.
Right.
Nobody went there wanting to get killed, but I think everybody, would have gone the next day to go back to work if they had the choice. I don't think that would have stopped any of these guys from working.
Right.
The fact that you killed them, that's the only reason you kept them from going to work the next day.
Isn't that what makes a firefighter a hero? And I have said this on this podcast a couple of times, that it's not that the firefighter rescues somebody or saves a life or puts a fire out. It's that he gets up the next day after losing friends, brothers, and goes back and does it again. I think that's the heroic thing.
Oh, we had a chief back in the turn of the last century named Croker. And they asked him, who's the bravest fireman you know? And he said, who can say bravest where all are brave? Because the bravest thing that you do is putting your hands up to become a fireman.
Right.
Everything you do after that is just part of the job.
Right.
But signing up, that's the bravery right there.
Now, I read somewhere that you said it's not a job, it's a vocation.
Yeah, I came up with a couple of, and it's funny too, because you say something, and that goes back to the Hollywood hash thing. If you say something, all of a sudden, I never thought I'd be a meme, but I've seen my picture, and then things I've said just pop up on the internet, and it's flattering because luckily they're good lines. I didn't say something stupid, so, but that's good. But I remember telling people, that were asking about it. It's such a unique job, firefighting, that they don't pay me to risk my life. They pay me to take care of the truck and to clean the building. I risk my life on my own. You can't pay me enough to risk my life.
Great.
That's just part of it. Because if you thought about risking your life, people say to you, oh, aren't you thinking about your family? How the heck can you possibly think of your family when you have to go dive into a window?
Right.
It's like, no, you're not thinking about your family. You're thinking about that person's family that's in there. We try to treat everybody like they're your own family.
Right.
And people thought that all that stuff, all the reverence we had was just a 9/11 thing. That when we would stop and we'd escort people out, and we always did that. Building collapses, fires, everybody got treated with the respect. I treated every person that I came across like they were my family, and it's just how it's done. If I think enough of you as a human being that I would risk my life to try to save you, well, then I should treat you with respect. It doesn't make sense to do it any other way.
Right.
But sometimes people are in such a big hurry that they want to get on to the next thing.
Right.
And all you have to do is slow down, do whatever you have to do with a little bit of dignity, and then get on to the next thing.
Now, after 9/11, the ceremonial stuff that for each firefighter that you guys did overwhelmed the system. There was at least 343 services that you guys did. And I know departments from all over the country came to New York to help you do it. How long did it take to where you guys finally got back to a normal operation? And let me jump back real quick. The ceremony that is done by the fire department for a fallen brother is massive. I mean, it's the march, it's the rig that's involved, it's the black coffin or the covered coffin in the back. Did every one of those services, I mean, did you do multiple a day? How did that go for you?
I tell you what, and a lot of it's a blur. I kept the calendar. I still have it somewhere. When I was working, when I was teaching in the rescue school, and when the funerals were. And it was unbelievable. You would just go from one thing to another to another. I ended up being the senior man in all the rescues. Just the guys that had more time than me all got killed. So I'm senior man in all the rescues, and it's a little bit scary. And now, like, when we're doing these funerals, when they fold the flag up, they're giving the flag to me to give to the family.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to go and talk to these people. And I think I did a really good job, but I really don't remember a word I said. But I've had people, relatives, girlfriends of the people that we lost, still hug me and, oh, what you said that day. I wish I remembered, but if they're happy, then I did a good job, and that's all it was, all I was supposed to do. But that's one of the most difficult things that we had to accomplish were those funerals. I mean, you're 100% right. And I thank every guy, and to this day, I try to make it a point, if I do any public speaking, to thank those from across the country that came to do what we couldn't. We were too busy. We're doing 2, 3, 4 funerals a day,
right.
Teaching in school, trying to work. Oh, and then being on the pile in between. So you you know, and then if you actually took a day off to try to catch up on your sleep or something. But those guys and gals across the country that showed up and those blue uniforms, that gave those families a piece of what we usually were able to do, but we just couldn't.
Right.
So they had the best that we could offer, and that was done by those people. I know a lot of the Nassau County departments were big time with putting up arches and going out of their way to try to make these things as good as they can for the families. And they did the same thing upstate. You know, a couple people had funerals in Jersey, wherever it was. The firefighters in every area rose to the occasion, as they do. I mean, you just look at the regular news, and if there's a horrible fire somewhere where somebody gets killed, and then there's always the arches up and the people on the side of the road, and we just do it. It's a natural thing to do. And that's one of the things that makes me the proudest out of all of the things that were done, but all those people that showed up for us.
That's amazing. When you say the pile, you're talking about the remains of the tower as it piled up in the middle of.
Yeah, the media called it ground zero. Nobody that was there ever referred to it as ground zero. I think I might have inadvertently said that phrase a couple of times in 25 years, but it wasn't ground zero to us. If you're standing back and you're trying to report and you're trying to figure out what's going on, yeah, different things. Ground zero can be used for that and for anything else where they dropped a bomb or whatever. But to us, it was the pile, and then it was the pit.
Gotcha.
That's just what guys called it, you know. And you went down there. The first couple of days, everybody was there. Then they realized that there's still going to be fires. We still have to get everything going. They got the rigs back the best they could. They moved people around, and they tried to get back into business. I guess it was by early October when we were back working in the firehouses again. I think for a week they didn't want us to go anywhere. They were afraid that we'd get killed again. And nothing worse than listening to the radio chattering, and you're supposed to go to that, and they're protecting you like a Fabergé egg or something.
Right.
But I could totally understand their thought process. You know, this is the biggest thing that ever happened in the fire service, and they were a little gun shy. But we just kept hammering them. We got to go. We got to go. And they finally they let us go back to work. And all of a sudden, boom, morale was back.
Oh, yeah, you were allowed to work again, and the Brotherhood came back in.
Just sitting in that firehouse. Why are we here?
Yeah.
Let me go back down to the pile.
Yeah.
Or let me go home, but just sitting here and then not go to fires, that doesn't make sense. But like I said, it was understandable. And once they thought it out, they figured out how to do it. And they did a great job. Whoever was in charge, Chief Norman, John Norman, and all the guys that were down there at the time, Nigro, all those fellas, the amount of logistics and the administrative end of it to replace the rigs and then try to replace 340 something people, which you can't replace.
Right.
You can fill the boot, but you can't replace the person that was in it. I mean, well, we have a quartermaster and they'll give you boots, you know, that's good. But somebody with Ray Downey, 40 something years of experience,
All right.
probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the whole world to rescue anywhere on the planet, and he's gone.
Right.
You know, it's just like, it was heartbreaking.
One of the other things that is coming out from the World Trade Center incident, 9/11, is the sickness that the first responders have gotten. There's been some people don't recognize it. Usually it's the government side that digs their heels in on it. But have you experienced it, or do you know people that have gotten that?
Oh, yeah. No, I've lost friends. Ray Pfeiffer was a dear friend of mine. He was a member of 40 Engine. Matter of fact, he got burned pretty good at the Macaulay Culkin fire. And then I think he switched over to driving a Chief or something after that. But he was down doing a recovery for a long time. And then sadly, it got him a couple of years back. But yeah, the list, I think they surpassed now, you know, by far what we lost in one day. Now it's just, it caught up and it's gone past it. And it's just unfortunate.
Now, you guys have the Port Authority down there, and those guys have turnouts as well, correct? They have bunker gear, whatever you call it, firefighter gear over there.
Well, yeah, the Port Authority, part of their responsibility is for whatever reason, the fire department gave up the airport, the New York City airports years ago. And the Port Authority police took it over. So those guys all have bunker gear and everything. They probably have a little crash truck in that building. I don't remember, but they have some kind of gear. I know the ESU cops in New York City, they have SCBA, but they don't have bunker gear. So, all of those guys are highly trained, highly motivated people, and they did a lot of really good work that day. If you look at the work that the cops and firefighters and EMTs did that day, we lost a dramatic number of people. But they figure around 20,000 people were rescued from those buildings.
Wow.
343 to save 20,000. It almost makes sense. You don't want to, that's a horrible number, but it almost makes sense when you look at it that, it's just, the whole thing is, it's crazy. And
mind-boggling. Yeah.
Exactly, mind-boggling.
Do you notice a tighter camaraderie now with law enforcement in New York and fire department in New York, or first responders?
It was, but then for me, I've lost it because I'm not there anymore.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, and it's the joint experience that you've gone through things. You get to see people at their finest and people at their not so best, and
right.
By and large, anybody that was wearing uniforms that day and the days following just did outrageously wonderful jobs.
You said your daughter was down at Ground Zero, the pile, during 9/11 or shortly after, because she was a reporter or she was writing articles. Can you give me a little bit about that? What is it that she wrote? Was it for newspaper, or what was that?
She was a television reporter. On Long Island, there is Channel 12. It's part of Cablevision. The Dolan brothers, they own Madison Square Garden. That Sphere thing in Vegas, they own that. And they got their money from setting up cable television on Long Island. So we've always known them, and they set up this news station, and my daughter was fortunate enough to get a job working as a reporter. And as it turns out, she was the one who alerted me that morning while I was sleeping in bed that there was a fire. So I roll out and I take off, and I don't come back for days now. She gets called into work, and she goes in, and as I've seen happen numerous times, as one of these things starts to unfold, all those satellite trucks start showing up, and the masts go up and the dishes go up. It looks like a forest of antennas suddenly appear, and they had their whole area on West Street for the media. And try to figure out exactly the timing of it. I think it was the third day. I hadn't been home yet. I'd slept over. And then we heard the president was coming. And I was real happy to hear that the president was coming. But I didn't want to be there because I knew it would stop. Everything would stop. The president's there. You can't have these big giant machines.
Yep.
And if you saw the torches they were using, and there was stuff flying everywhere. All that's going to stop, as it should. You got to protect the president. But I knew it was great for the morale of the guys down there. I knew the country needed it. The city needed it. The president needed it. Everybody. And I needed to go home. I hadn't been home in a while. And I looked at a couple of guys that were thinking like me. The president's coming. Here's our chance to leave. So three of us decided that was smart. We talked to the lieutenant and said, we're going to go. We'll be back, but I don't want to be here for this. So I hadn't seen my wife. I talked to her on the phone long enough to tell her I was still alive. And as we started walking out, and we are covered the dust still. Everything has got this patina on it of all this dust from down there. Even thinking about it gives me the willies to this day. But as we're walking back towards our car, and luckily the car didn't get flattened when the buildings came down because we were that close, I saw all those antennas up, and I just said to the two guys that I was with, hold on a second, let me just go see if my daughter's over there, just on a whim. And I walked across the street and I started going, and I saw one of the trucks had a big 12 on it, so I knew that would be her truck. And all of a sudden she popped up, and she came running out, and she jumps on me, puts her arms around my neck in a cloud of dust. And so we were both crying and all that kind of stuff. And we talked briefly, told her what my plan was. And then we went back to the firehouse, got cleaned up there as best we could. Everybody went home, have dinner with your family, spend the night in your own bed, and then we're coming back here. We're not leaving again. So that was the plan. And that's how it worked. So it was so unique to see her in that situation that was really the first time that she was covering a thing that I was involved in. Was she did Long Island news. Like Freeport is on the south shore of Long Island, close to Jones Beach. So if I was doing fires there, she might go, and I had done little things with her to, help them film things if they needed fire trucks, people in the background. But to actually show up where I was working and she was working, that was the only time it ever happened. And it was quite amazing.
How far is Freeport from the pile?
Well, Freeport's in about the middle of Nassau County on the southern part, on the water. We're all the way down at the bottom, and there's bays and marshes, and then Jones Beach, and then the ocean. And if you go to the west, I guess we're about 25, 30 miles from Manhattan.
Okay.
The wonderful thing is, though, people would ask me, how long does it take you to get to work? My answer always was anywhere between 90 minutes and 2 days.
Yeah.
Just depends on the traffic.
Yep.
So
I hear you.
On a Sunday, if you're standing on it, going home from a night tour, you can get home in 30 minutes. There's nobody on the road and you're doing 70. After that, it's 90 minutes.
Regarding 9/11 and all the sicknesses that affected the people, in the years after, would you be able to talk about that, the sicknesses and what caused them?
Yeah, well, a little bit, just because it even affects me to whatever degree eventually, hopefully never, but we were down there from the beginning, and you could taste it in the smoke that this is bad stuff. We knew that what was in the air in the very beginning was granular glass, little particulates of microplastics, micro slivers of metal, like you name it. That if you look real close, when those buildings came down, they were like giant grinders. And everything that was in that building got ground up. That's why we couldn't find some of the people. Unfortunately, some of the people got ground up into a powder where we couldn't find them. I mean, that's just the science of it. The same thing with office furniture and the glass and steel of the building. All of that got airborne. And our bodies are not designed to be assaulted by things like that. And some people got sick right away. Other people, it took longer. There's a whole host of different kind of cancers, depending on what it is, your susceptibility, because there were guys that I stood next to. There was one guy, big, strong guy for one of the rescue companies, and, noted as a super tough guy, and we lost him like a year or two later from cancer, and I'm standing right next to him, breathing the same air as him. Nobody really knows why this person gets sick or why that person doesn't, but we know why the sick ones are getting sick. And it's not even just the cops and firefighters, the first responders. It's all the people that were down there that lived in the neighborhood, went to the schools, worked in the neighborhood, and they came back and the powers that be said, the air is fine. And they were lying. We knew it. You could taste it in the smoke, but life has to go on. And I guess for whatever reason, they felt that was the best tactic to take. But I think by and large, the firefighters had a pretty good idea that this is carcinogenic, just like we knew about the rest of the smoke is carcinogenic. But that's where the bravery comes in. There's a job to be done, and you just have to do it. You were kidding me about Hollywood Hash earlier. I avoided cameras at the World Trade Center. I wouldn't go near them. I did not. That Hollywood Hash was a joke to me, but I avoided cameras. I went out of my way. I think there's 2 pictures of me my whole time down there because I saw a camera and went the other way. But we knew that air was bad, but you breathed it anyway. You didn't have any choice. Right. They gave us those little paper masks, but if you ever used any kind of, like back in when we had the illness, when everybody was getting sick, and people were wearing masks, it's difficult to breathe through those masks, and then just start adding plaster and dust and all the rest of it. They just kept clogging and clogging. And the one picture of me on the 11th, I have one on, but it's caked with crap and it's hanging around my neck. So you're breathing the air like everybody else. So, and I would do the same thing again in the heartbeat. Yep. It's the only way you could work.
I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Why is it FDNY, not NYFD?
Okay, good one. Back in the volunteer era, when they were brawling and going crazy and doing all the other stuff, fighting over the hydrants and whatnot, 1865, they finally had enough of it. And through the state of New York, they passed a law that created the Metropolitan Fire Department. So when they became a paid department in 1865, and the whole first year, they were the Metropolitan Fire Department, and then I think it maybe went 2 or 3 years, and then there was a shakeup in the department again. I think it had something to do with Tammany Hall again, whatever. And the state did a shakeup, and when they redid it, they changed the name from the Metropolitan Fire Department to the Fire Department of the City of New York. So that's where the FDNY came from. So if you had before on the rig it said MFD, they just took the M off and it put NY, so they didn't have to do too much labeling. But that's why they call it FDNY, because the technical term for the fire department is the fire department of the City of New York, not the New York City Fire Department.
I was wrong. I was close, but I was wrong.
Now you'll be right. Next time somebody asks you, now you know.
I got it now. Absolutely. I've got a couple questions about PTSD, and I don't think I'm going to go down that road. I kind of feel from you that the 9/11 was probably your biggest incident with your most traumatic losses, and probably keeps you awake a little bit at night. Are there any other ones that kind of hang with you?
Yeah, there's so many. It's unfortunate. It's luckily I'm not too bothered by bad dreams and all that kind of stuff. It was tough when it was all happening. Honestly, it was tough then, but with a little distance, once we started doing stuff again, and once you could start doing your job again, everything changed. Morale went back up. Everything was doing fine, and you didn't mind that you were working these crazy hours and all the rest of it. You just wanted to be able to do something,
right?
Because that's firefighters always have, whether it's correct or not, they always have the feeling that they are in control to some degree or another about their job, when in reality they're not. There's certain tried and true things that we do to try to gain control of the situation, but they don't always work. But you have to operate under the guise of, you know what you're doing, and this has worked before, so this is all we're going to try. And you just go, give it your best shot.
Right. I've got a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask you kind of rapid fire. Chief or firefighter, which position did you enjoy more?
Firefighter.
Rescue work or engine work?
tough one. Rescue work.
What is the most underrated skill in the fire department?
Listening.
I love it. What is one lesson every firefighter should know?
That just because you go to fires doesn't mean that the people that you're trying to help go to fires. And you have to have patience. I remember getting a little short with somebody one time, and my captain just whispered in my ear, even though she's 80 years old, it's probably the first time she ever was at a fire.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, sorry. I was trying to be flippant, like be lighthearted, but you got to be kinder with people.
Right. Okay.
But she'd get the firehouse humor, but she was scared to death. So,
Yeah, you kind of have to hold the firehouse humor to firehouse, don't you?
you learn.
One tradition we should never lose.
It's one that you have to be careful with. You should earn your way into a firehouse. And you should earn your way into the firehouse by doing the work that's expected of a new person. Nobody should have to tell you to jump in the sink. Nobody should have to tell you whatever the grunt work is. The new people are supposed to do it to prove to everybody else that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get the job. When they start doing all the crazy hazing and all the rest of it, like a bucket of water is not a big deal, but when you start going after a person and you never let up on them, that's just being a bully.
Right.
And that shouldn't be tolerated in your family. It shouldn't be tolerated in the general public. And it certainly shouldn't be tolerated in the firehouse. But for a person, if you're in a busy place, you can prove yourself a little bit by going to a couple of jobs that you can do it. But if you're in a slow place, it might take you a long time to prove how good a firefighter you're going to be. But you can prove what you're worth in the house right on the first day.
Yep.
You have to give them a chance to do it, and the new people, you have to get in there and get dirty. I mean, that's the fun part of the job, getting dirty. And I mean, everything, mopping floors, the whole thing. Have a ball.
One of the things we're doing with Austin is as he's gotten into the fire service or is wanting to, we're kind of tracking his progress. If there was somebody listening that is interested in getting into the fire department, what piece of advice would you give them?
Really to be aware of all the different facets, and even just like a little something that I just touched on briefly earlier about like the firehouse humor stuff. We always call people trapped in fires victims, but if they're in a car accident or something, they're a patient. You know, if you're doing any kind of basic first aid on people, whatever, they're not a victim, they're a patient. They're only a victim if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing to them. So if you're taking care of those people, tender loving care goes the longest way. We are so lucky. People love us. People love firefighters. Of all the first responders, I mean, you could go just look in the streets of any major city. A cop car goes by, people like, you see a cop, everybody's ducking. Fire truck goes by, oh, they're making a sign of the cross, they're saying a little prayer, you know, like everybody, because the fire department is a positive job. They're the only people in the world that, number one, get to battle elemental nature and have the audacity to think that we can control it. You know, a lifeguard could go out into the big giant waves and save somebody that's drowning, but he can't calm the sea.
Right.
We actually pull up and save the people that are trapped in the fire and put the fire out. Nobody else gets to do anything, you know, on that level.
Right.
But it's those little things, the little interactions with little kids with their bicycles, putting air in their tires when they come by the firehouse, giving a tour. I always went out of my way because those little boys and those little girls are the ones that are going to be the future of the fire service. And I treat them the way I'd want my kids to be treated, or the way that I was treated when I was a little kid. And it goes a long way. And the same thing, just any interaction you have with people, you got to remember anytime you're out in the public and you're wearing a fire shirt, people know who you are. They might not understand the numbers or whatever, but they know you're a firefighter. And if you're acting like an idiot, then you're doing us all a disservice. So when you're wearing the colors, you got to be careful about how you're acting.
Amen. I love it. Now, you had given a couple names earlier of some guys who had written books or that were technical leaders, I would say. Can you say their names again? I want to give them a shout out as well.
Well, I was lucky enough. I got to work and drive John Norman for several years when he was Captain of Rescue One. He ended up being one of the top chiefs in the job, ran special operations. He's written a number of books on rescue work, technical stuff, gives great lectures. He goes to all around the country doing lectures. He's one that, a contemporary that I've learned a lot from. Actually, I think I got on the job a little bit before him, but he was one of the guys who was actually studying instead of reading novels like I was. But I think the guy that most impressed me was Vinny Dunn. Vinny Dunn is a deputy chief. He's on the circuit, still does lectures and everything. He does a whole thing about battle space, the collapse of burning buildings, all sorts of technical stuff. And I didn't realize how long I had been working for him because I was just going back doing the things with my daughters and doing a quick research before we do it to make sure I'm getting the dates right and the streets right. And every time I look, Vinny Dunn was a chief, and Chief Dunn, and Chief Dunn. It's like the guy was there for all these amazing jobs. So, and he goes back all the way to the 23rd Street collapse. He was a new lieutenant that reported up, and two companies walk up to the command post because he told me this story sitting in Rescue One, and the chief looked at him with a brand new white front piece on, and looked at the other guy who's got dirt on him, and he goes, "Yeah, just stand here a second, Lou." And he gives this guy an assignment: take your company and you go here. And those men never came back.
Oh.
Those men got on the line and got caught in the collapse, and Vinny was sent somewhere else, and he kind of felt that it happened because I was new or whatever, right, or whatever it was. But that changed his thinking on how he's going to approach the entire rest of his career about burning buildings and the responsibility that everybody, but especially the higher in rank you get, the greater your scope of responsibility, and the more information that you have, the safer you make it for everybody. And he's a guy I could just sit and talk fires with for hours and hours. I've been there, done that. He's the chief in my book.
Wow.
What was your most memorable call throughout all the years?
I'd have to say 9/11, but that's not even fair because I wasn't working. But that's probably the most memorable incident. I think one of the things that strikes me, it was an inconsequential fire unless you happen to own the building. But I do have a strong memory of it just because I was driving the truck, and this is the only time it happened to me in New York City. But I guess I turned off of 42nd Street onto 7th Avenue, I think. And I drove the truck into a wall of smoke where I had to stop because I couldn't see anything. And the guys had to get out of the back of the truck and walk in front of us so that I wouldn't run anybody over or crash into anybody for an entire block till we came out of the smoke again. And that was one of the most unique things to me that I never had that before. It was just so weird to be driving this big giant truck and then I can't see anything. So I could blow horns and blink lights all I want, but I can't see. So and it turned out to be a pretty good fire. And, it was a hard time putting it out, but I think just that couple of minutes getting the truck to the fire, I never had anything like that before. Different. And that's the fun of these fires, that you can go to 100,000 fires. They're all different. I mean, you can go to 20 tenement fires, but they're all going to be a little bit different because of the fuel, the weather, everything. That's why it's fun.
Behind every great man, there is a great woman. Who is the great woman behind you?
Oh, my wife Joanne, without a doubt. It's funny. She had her eye on me when we both went to parochial school, and then we started dating in high school. And she turned out to be one of the smartest people I ever met. She had a master's degree plus 60 and all these things. She almost got a doctorate. We talked her out of that. Stopped going to school and stay home with us. But she was always there. She married a telephone man that turned into a volunteer fireman, that turned into a New York City fireman, that had to go to a rescue company. And she just smiled the whole time. And every time I called from the hospital, she showed up and just shook her head because, unfortunately, I got banged up a couple of times along the way. Surgery, broken bones, burns, stitches. I do it all over again, and I know she'd be right by my side for the whole thing. So I'd have to say Joanne was there for everything. And what she did, and my friend Bruce's wife, Karen, what they did after 9/11, the wives and the families of the living members, what they did for the families of those that we lost was
Wow.
everything that we did with funerals and all the rest, they did it too.
Right.
Unbelievable.
You know, I got one more question. Are there any skis back there that are famous? I'm a Spitulski. So I've heard Irish people that are famous in New York. I haven't heard a single Polak that's famous out there. Do you know any skis?
Well, I was, I'll give you the best ski of all. Joel Kanaski, who took the seat when I retired. He took my seat as driving Rescue 1. He was in Rescue 1 with me for a long time. Great guy. We taught together at the rescue school, and he has to be one of the smartest people I know. When I did that cartoon wall of all the different firefighters in the company, I had him holding a book that said E equals MC square and a hose, because he was good with the tools and he was a smart guy. So he's the smartest ski that I know.
There you go. That's a win. That is a perfect way to end this conversation. I love it. Sir, you have been an incredible guest. I'm going to go out and get some of your books, especially since you are the historian, and you've done a number of historic books.
Yeah, just paulhashagen.com.
There you go.
The orders come to me, and I sign the books, and I send them out. There you go.
I may show up at your door and ask for a signature.
All right. Well, I like Heineken's or any kind of green, so just knock with your elbows.
That's all you got to say. I will either use my foot or my elbow, or I'll have my son knock. Yeah.
There you go.
We got you.